This is a comparison of animation workflows in the creation of 3D pre-visualizations. The aim of this project was to prove if motion capture data taken from an online source was better than using keyframe animation methods when creating a pre-visualization. To do this, we had to assess the efficiency of the workflows, evaluate the usability of the workflows, and user friendliness of the workflows. And then we use this data to compare the two workflows against one another and then work out which of the two workflows would be more useful when creating pre-visualizations. As for who this project is aimed at, it is mainly towards independent filmmakers and small indie studios. The reason for this being is that the project can provide key information on each workflow for when they want to make pre-visualizations, which the workflow will be easier to use, easy to understand, which one will be more time efficient. Yeah, so that's also the reason why Blender was used, as it's a free open source software that pretty much anyone can get their hands on, and also why it's not being targeted towards the larger studios, as they'll be using Maya over Blender, as it's much more of an industry standard. While conducting research into this project, the general assumption was that we were actually going to be comparing two workflows and two animation softwares. The reason for only one animation software being used is because we were looking to do Maya and Blender, but unfortunately, when it came to getting free access to Maya, it wasn't possible. They require you to have either a student or business account, and to get a student account, you have to get a university or school to sign off on it, and to get a business account, you have to enter in credit card or debit card information, which for this test we weren't really comfortable asking participants to provide. And for when we were looking into the motion capture data, we did look at some other websites, but none of them really offered what Mixamo did. Mixamo was easy to use, showed you previews of the animations, and made it easier to import files. Whereas other websites had file types we hadn't seen before, and you would have to use other paid software to put it into a file that Blender can actually use. So that's why we mainly focused on Mixamo for this. As stated previously, in this project there'll be two workflows being tested against one another, one being the motion capture data workflow and the other being a keyframe animation workflow. Participants in the motion capture workflow will be definitely using motion capture data from Mixamo. Both groups were told to time how long it took them to complete each section. So this would be the animation, the camera positioning, the lighting of the scene, and the final texturing of the scene. They were also given a sheet to track how many times they sought external help from the tutorials. They were told specifically to mark down any time they had to go back through the tutorial, not just when they went to it. So if they started watching it, then had to go back. They had to say when they did that. And then once they had completed the workflows, they had to complete a survey, just answering how they felt about completing each area. The groups were also given the exact same storyboard. This storyboard contained images of the motion that they would have to do, camera positioning, timings for each scene specifically, and then they were also given the tutorials on basic animation for each part, so how to use the keyframe animation tool in Blender, and also how to import animation from Mixamo, and also tutorials on basic Blender controls to help them get acquainted with it. And then once they had completed their pre-visualizations, they sent them back to us so that we could play blast them. This was primarily because we wanted to keep all the file naming the same, and we also wanted to make sure that all the camera settings were right, so that we wouldn't get like loads of different resolutions from the play blasts. These are the timings results. What we did was, when we got all the timings back, we uh, worked out the totals for each and then broke them down into averages. As you can see here, it's quite clear that the motion capture workflow was the faster of the two workflows. In the results themselves, it was clear that it was the animation section that took longer uh, for the keyframe participants. And again, when it came to the help count, motion capture did better again. With this one, we just took together all the totals from the help count sheets and just added them all together to see which group required less help, and it was the motion capture workflow once again. And then finally, with the questionnaire breakdown, for a third time, motion capture did perform better. With the questionnaire, they were asked to rate each area 0 to 10, and basically the higher the score, the more difficult they found that area. And so, as keyframe animation has the higher score overall, it was more complicated. Well, the participants found it more complicated, I should say. Obviously, from the results, it did show that the motion capture workflow was the better of the two. But while it was the better on paper, when looking at the actual animations, there were some problems that we had with the motion capture participants. Because of how Mixamo works, it's a sort of a library of motion capture movements, so you're not going to get the exact specific one you want, and it also won't meet the timings as well, which is a problem we've had. So we had to give both groups a 1 second grace period, which they could go 1 second under the specified amount. And what we found with the Mixamo participants is that their animations didn't match the ones shown on the storyboard, and we have attributed this to they did have a limited number of animations they could choose from for each movement. So here's just an example of one of the animations made by the motion capture participants. So it's pretty clear that it's not really what we asked for when telling them, or well, when giving them the storyboards, which is a bit of a problem when it comes to justifying using Mixamo. And also, some participants did report some problems with the actual scene itself when using motion capture animation, because it had participants making the models jump over a gap, and obviously the gap was a bit too large for some participants, so they had to use sort of camera trickery and keyframe animation to close the gap. So that's another kind of weakness. And that's not also to say that there weren't some problems with the pre-visualizations given by the keyframe animation participants. While the movements they gave were accurate to what we had given them on the storyboards, they were extremely stiff and not really up to what we would have hoped, but this really should have been expected as the participants have never really had any experience with animation. Here's just a quick example of one of the animations that they did. So overall, with the findings and results, it does show that the motion capture workflow is the stronger of the two. However, that's not to say that it's the better, as clearly when being compared to the storyboard images that were provided, participants were not able to get animations that closely matched them. So more testing probably should be focused on the accuracy of movement when this was being conducted.